Hello, and welcome back again to Gospel First. Up to now, the disciples have mostly been watching Jesus. They've been learning by proximity, standing near the miracles, listening to the teachings. But today in Matthew 10, everything becomes personal. Jesus calls them by name, and then he sends them. Now, this chapter can feel unsettling because it's where discipleship stops being an idea and becomes a way of life. So let's step into this slowly and listen for the courage Jesus gives, not the fear that we bring. So let's get started. Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 to 4 is where Jesus calls ordinary people. And Matthew tells us in Matthew chapter 10, verse 1, and when he had called unto him his 12 disciples. Then Matthew lists their names, not titles, not qualifications, just names. They're fishermen, a tax collector, men with doubts, tempers, and questions. Jesus doesn't recruit the impressive, he calls the willing. So the principle here is that Jesus builds his kingdom with ordinary people who are willing to follow. In Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 to 10, Jesus gives the disciples some instructions. He says, "Go not into the way of the Gentiles, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Then he says in Matthew verse 8, "Freely you have received, freely give." And then in verse 9, it says, "Provide neither gold nor silver nor brass in your purses." So Jesus sends them without excess, not because preparation is wrong, but because dependence matters. This mission will not succeed because of resources. It will succeed because of trust. Something to think about. Where do I rely more on? Security or the things of God? What would it look like to trust him a little more? Next is Matthew chapter 10, verses 11 to 15. Jesus is honest about what lies ahead. Some will receive him, some will not. So in Matthew chapter 10, verse 13, it says, "If the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. Let your peace return to you." Now this is gentle wisdom. Not everyone is ready. Rejection does not mean failure. Sometimes peace is meant to be carried forward, not forced. So what's the principle? Faithfulness is not measured by acceptance, but by obedience. Next, we're going to be in chapter 10, verses 16 to 23. Then Jesus speaks plainly in verse 16. "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves." Now, this is not fear-mongering. It's realism. Following Jesus does not remove difficulty. But he adds this in Matthew verse 19. "Take no thought how or what you shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour." Now notice here that they're not sent alone, neither are we. So something to think about. Where do I feel unprepared? And do I trust that God meets me in the moment? Next is Matthew 10, verses 26 to 31. Now 3 times in this chapter, Jesus says some version of, "Fear them not." Then in this verse, Jesus says something tender. "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father?" And then he says, "Fear ye not, therefore, you are more valued than many sparrows." That's in verse 31. Notice here that Jesus knows fear will come, so he answers it with worth. So the principle here is that courage grows from knowing we are seen and valued by God. Next is Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 to 42. Jesus speaks honestly about division and cost, not because he desires conflict, but because truth often exposes difference. Then he says in verse 38, "He that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me." Now this is not a call to suffering for its own sake. It is a call to daily surrender. And then comes the promise, "He that loses his life for my sake shall find it." That's verse 39. And then Jesus ends with the encouragement in verse 40. He that receiveth you receiveth me. Now notice even small acts matter. Whosoever shall give a cup of cold water shall in no wise lose his reward, in verse 42. So in closing, I want you to sit with this. Jesus does not sugarcoat discipleship, but he never sends us alone. If today you feel unsure or unqualified or quietly afraid, remember, Jesus calls people by name. He gives what is needed, and he walks with those he sends. You are not forgotten, and even a cup of cold water still counts. So in closing, I want to say thank you again for being here with us. May the Spirit of God continue to fill your heart and draw you closer to Jesus Christ. And again, if your heart feels even a gentle nudge, I invite you to subscribe and share so that we can spread the gospel of Jesus Christ together. And I'll see you tomorrow as we continue walking with Matthew in Matthew chapter 11 and 12. Until then, God bless.